Night is honest. During the day, you can hide. You can smile. You can pretend you're fine. But at night, when the lights are off and the noise fades, there's no escaping yourself. This is where transformation begins. Not in comfort, not in motivation, but in the quiet war between who you are and who you refuse to remain. This story begins far from confidence, far from power, far from victory. It begins with fear. A child trapped in an unforgiving environment, a place where weakness is exposed immediately, where being small means being hunted, where survival is not a concept, it's a daily requirement. Every day delivers a new lesson. If you can't defend yourself, the world will take from you your dignity, your safety, your identity. The body is soft, the mind is confused, and the soul feels misplaced. Sleep doesn't come easily here. When the body finally lies down, the mind stays awake, replaying insults, reliving moments of humiliation, imagining different endings that never happened. Most people drown in those thoughts, okay? But something else can happen. If pain is left unattended long enough, the pain begins to sharpen. One night, lying in the dark, a realization forms, not as words, but as instinct. I can't stay like this. Not I want to change. Not I hope things get better. But I refuse to be powerless again. That thought doesn't bring peace. It brings tension. It's the kind of tension that tightens your jaw. It's the kind that hardens your breathing. It's the kind that keeps your eyes open long after midnight. This is where danger is born. Not violence, not rage. Discipline. The understanding that if the world is brutal, you must become structured. If life is chaotic, you must become controlled. If fear surrounds you, you must master it, not eliminate it. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is the signal. Every night, the body rests, but the mind trains. Visualization begins. You imagine standing your ground. You imagine not backing down. You imagine your posture changing, your gaze steady, your presence heavier. You imagine being the version of yourself that no one dares to test. And night after night, that image becomes clearer. Dangerous people are not created by accident, okay? They are shaped deliberately, often in silence, while others sleep to forget. You stay awake to remember why you must change. You start noticing patterns. The strongest people aren't loud. They aren't reactive. They don't explain themselves, okay? We move with certainty, and certainty is trained. It's trained in repetition, in early mornings, in lonely rooms, in discipline when no one is watching. But before the body ever transforms, the mind must. You learn to sit with discomfort, okay? To let fear exist without running from it, to observe it. This is crucial, because the moment you stop fleeing fear, it loses power over you. Lying in bed, you stop wishing for escape. You stop asking for mercy from life. Instead, you ask a better question. What kind of man would survive this world effortlessly? The answer is not gentle, not soft, not apologetic. The answer is dangerous. Not dangerous to others, dangerous to circumstances. Someone who can endure pressure without collapsing. Someone who can stay calm when chaos erupts. Someone whose presence alone shifts the balance of a room. This realization changes how you sleep. Your nights are no longer rest. They are preparation. Every thought becomes intentional. Every memory becomes fuel. Every fear becomes a target. You stop numbing yourself. You stop distracting yourself. You lie there, breathing slowly, visualizing strength, composure, control. You don't fight sleep. You train beside it. And somewhere between midnight and morning, something subtle happens. You are no longer the victim in your own mind. You are becoming the threat. Morning comes whether you are ready or not. The world doesn't care how little you slept, what you replayed in your head, or how heavy your thoughts were in the dark. You wake up in the same place, with the same walls, the same noises, the same people who expect the same version of you. But something inside has shifted. There is tension now, not fear. not panic. Pressure. And pressure demands direction. You begin to understand that becoming dangerous is not about exploding outward. It's about compressing inward. Like a spring being tightened, slowly, deliberately. It's every insult you swallow instead of reacting. Every urge you control instead of releasing. Every moment you stand still when your instincts scream to run. All of it adds pressure. And pressure, when guided, becomes force. Most people misunderstand strength. They think it's loud. They think it's aggression, domination, chaos. Okay, but real strength is quiet. It's controlled. It's the ability to feel everything and show nothing. It's the ability to walk through hostility without flinching. It's absorb tension without leaking it back into the world. You start to notice how weak people behave. They react instantly. They explain themselves. They seek validation. They need to be seen. And the moment you see it, you realize something uncomfortable. You've lived like that too, reacting, defending, hoping others would stop. That ends here. You learn restraint. You learn stillness. You learn how to lower your voice instead of raising it. How to slow your movements instead of rushing. Okay? How to look without staring. Speak without proving. Stand without posturing. This is not softness, tearing. This is control. At night, when you lie down again, sleep feels different. Your body is tired, but your mind is alert, not restless, focused. You replay the day, not with regret, but with analysis. Where did you lose composure? Where did emotion take the lead? Where did fear slip through the cracks? You don't judge yourself, you study yourself, because dangerous people are not emotional, okay? They are precise. You visualize correction. You imagine the same moments, but this time you see yourself calm, steady, unshaken. You don't imagine winning arguments. You imagine not needing them. You don't imagine revenge. You imagine presence, so solid that conflict dissolves before it forms. Slowly, your posture changes. Your walk changes. Your breathing changes. Even when nothing happens, you are preparing, and preparation compounds. Days pass, weeks pass. No one notices the shift at first. That's the point. Transformation that announces itself is usually fragile. Real change happens underground, unseen, uncelebrated. You begin to enjoy discipline, not because it feels good, but because it feels right. Early mornings become familiar. Repetition becomes comforting. Pain becomes information instead of punishment. You learn that confidence is not believing you are unbeatable. It is knowing you can endure more than expected, that you can remain composed when others fracture, that you don't need to rush because time is no longer your enemy. At night, the dark no longer feels threatening. It feels instructional. The memories that once haunted you now serve you. Every moment of fear becomes a reminder of why weakness is not an option. Not because the world is cruel, but because you refuse to be at its mercy. You are no longer asking life to be easier. You are becoming stronger. There is a moment, lying awake, when you realize something quietly powerful. If chaos enters the room, it won't control you. If pressure rises, you won't panic. If fear appears, you will observe it, breathe through it, and act deliberately. This is what it means to be dangerous, not unpredictable, not violent, Kabul. And the world senses this long before you speak. Your eyes hold less noise. Your movements waste nothing. Your silence carries weight. You don't announce your presence. You don't demand respect, okay? You earn it through composure. Sleep finally takes you. It's not escape anymore. It's integration. So the work continues, even as your body rests. Tomorrow, the pressure tightens again. Tomorrow, control sharpens further. And slowly, invisibly, relentlessly, you are no longer becoming dangerous. You are dangerous. By the third phase, something subtle but irreversible has taken hold. You no longer feel the need to prove that you are changing. In fact, the need to be seen doing anything at all begins to disappear. This is one of the first signs that the transformation is real. When validation loses its grip, clarity replaces it. Your days start to feel heavier, but not overwhelming. Heavier with intention. Every action carries weight now. You are no longer drifting from moment to moment. You are choosing. In choice, repeated daily, builds identity. You begin to understand that danger is not about what you can do to others. It is about what you can withstand without breaking. Pressure no longer surprises you. Resistance no longer discourages you. Discomfort no longer signals retreat, it signals growth. You notice how easily most people collapse under minor stress. A raised voice, a delay, a challenge. Okay? React, explain, defend. You don't judge them, simply see it clearly now. You were there once. You lived there, because something has separated you. You have trained your nervous system to stay calm in situations where others unravel. Your breath stays slow. Your jaw stays relaxed. Your eyes stay steady. This isn't arrogance. It's familiarity with pressure. You've rehearsed it too many times in the dark for it to shock you now. At night, the bed has become a training ground rather than a refuge. You don't collapse into sleep anymore. You enter it deliberately. Your breathing slows. Your body releases. Your mind sharpens. You replay the day again. But now the review is shorter, cleaner, less emotional. You are not haunted anymore. You are refining. You identify small inefficiencies in your behavior. Moments where energy leaked. Words that were unnecessary. Reactions that were too quick. And instead of criticizing yourself, you adjust, like sharpening a blade, one careful pass at a time. This is how danger compounds. It's not through dramatic change, but through relentless precision. There is an important shift that happens here. Okay? You stop fantasizing about the future version of yourself. Okay? You stop imagining the moment when everything changes. Okay? Because it already has. Quietly, gradually, permanently. You don't need to feel powerful to be powerful. You don't need to feel confident to act with confidence. Feelings have become secondary. Discipline leads now. This is why sleep feels deeper, heavier, more earned. Your body trusts you. Your mind trusts you. You are no longer at war with yourself. And when fear appears, because it still does, it arrives differently. It doesn't paralyze. It sharpens awareness. It slows time. It brings focus. You no longer ask fear to leave. You invite it to sit quietly while you decide what to do next. That alone separates you from most people. Dangerous individuals are not fearless. They are familiar with fear, spent so many nights observing it that it no longer controls their hands. You begin to carry yourself differently in public spaces. It's not rigid. It's not tense. Relaxed. Grounded. People feel it before they understand it. Conversations shift. Energy adjusts. You don't dominate the room. The room accommodates you. You speak less. When you do speak, your words land heavier. You move slower. It's not because you lack urgency, but because you have control. Rushed movement is often a sign of internal chaos. You no longer live there. At night, lying still, there is a quiet satisfaction. It's not pride. Alignment. The sense that your actions and values are no longer fighting each other. You are becoming consistent, predictable to yourself, reliable under pressure. This is rare. Most people live fragmented lives. It's one version of themselves during the day, another at night, one in public, another alone. You are integrating, becoming whole. And wholeness is dangerous because it cannot be manipulated easily. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be shaken by opinion or circumstance. As sleep takes over, there is no need to escape anymore. The dark no longer feels like an enemy. It feels like a partner, a place where truth shows itself without distraction. Tomorrow will bring resistance. It always does, but you no longer dread it. Resistance is confirmation. It means the path is working. You started as someone trying to survive the night. You became someone who trained in it. And now, as your eyes close, one thing is clear. You are no longer preparing to become dangerous. You are learning how to remain that way. Once danger becomes internalized, the real work begins. This is where most people fail. They think transformation is a finish line. They think once confidence appears, the process is complete. They relax. They soften. They drift. You don't. Because you've learned something crucial. Power that isn't maintained decays. The world doesn't stop testing you just because you've changed. In fact, it tests you more. Pressure increases when weakness disappears. Resistance intensifies when you stop breaking easily. This is not punishment. It's calibration. You begin to notice it in small ways. Subtle challenges, quiet provocations, situations designed to pull reactions out of you. Okay? People who sense the shift but don't understand it and instinctively try to disrupt it. Before, this would have triggered you. Now, it informs you. You see clearly that control is not a personality trait. It's a skill. Skill, it dulls without use. So you train it deliberately. Not just in moments of conflict, but in boredom, in routine, in silence, in restraint when it would be easier to indulge. You deny yourself small comforts on purpose. Not to suffer, but to remind yourself who is in command. Discipline is no longer a tool. It's an identity. At night, when the body rests, the mind shifts focus. Q. Stop visualizing survival. You stop rehearsing defense. That stage is complete. Now, you visualize dominance, not over others, but over self. You imagine staying calm in moments that would normally spike adrenaline. You imagine holding eye contact without tension. You imagine your voice slow, grounded, unhurried. You imagine choosing when to engage and when to walk away. Choice is the highest form of power. Dangerous people are not constantly alert. They are selectively engaged. They do not waste energy proving anything, okay? They conserve it. They decide where to place it. Kinda, you begin to feel this conservation in your body. Your movements become economical. Your reactions minimal. Your presence efficient. Nothing extra. Nothing sloppy. You start sleeping differently. Deeper. Shorter. More intentional. Sleep becomes recovery, not escape. Your mind no longer races uncontrollably. It scans. It organizes. It shuts down when necessary. This is important. A mind that cannot rest cannot dominate. Exhaustion breeds mistakes. Chaos loves fatigue. You protect your sleep like a weapon. And when you wake, there is no hesitation, no negotiation, no inner debate. The plan is already set. You execute quietly. People around you may not understand what changed. They might say, you're colder, quieter, more distant. They might feel unsettled without knowing why. That's fine. This clarity often feels threatening to those who live in confusion. You are not isolating yourself. You are refining access. Not everyone deserves proximity to your energy. Not everyone earns your attention. You've learned the cost of distraction, and you refuse to pay it again. At night, lying still, you recognize a new truth. Danger is not intensity, it's consistency. Anyone can be intense for a moment. Few can remain controlled every day. That's why most people never become truly formidable. They rely on emotion. You rely on structure. You understand now that your past pain was not an accident. It was preparation. It forced you to develop awareness early. It introduced you to fear before comfort could dull you. And now, instead of running from that past, you carry it correctly. Not as rage, not as resentment, but as edge. An edge that keeps you sharp. You don't announce your standards. You live them. You don't threaten. You don't posture. You simply don't bend. And that is felt. This module is not about becoming more aggressive. It's about becoming more deliberate, more selective, more precise. You are no longer reacting to the world. You are positioning yourself within it. And as sleep comes, calm and heavy, one thought settles in. without effort. You are not chasing power anymore. You are maintaining it. At this stage, you begin to recognize a hard truth most people never accept. Control attracts pressure. The more stable you become, the more the world tries to destabilize you. Not always aggressively, sometimes subtly, through temptation, through comfort, through distraction disguised as reward. This is where many lose their edge. They mistake relief for victory. They mistake calm for completion. You don't. You understand that comfort is the most patient enemy. It waits until vigilance drops, till standards loosen, until discipline starts negotiating with excuses. So you stay alert, not tense, but aware. Your days become structured by non-negotiables, simple rules, clear boundaries. You decide in advance who you are and what you tolerate. This removes hesitation. Decision fatigue disappears when identity is clear. You no longer ask yourself, should I? You ask, does this align? If it doesn't, it's dismissed without emotion. This emotional neutrality is new. Before, decisions carried weight, doubt, anxiety, panic, efficient, almost boring. And that's exactly why they work. Boredom is stability. Stability is power. At night, lying in the dark, you reflect less on what happened and more on how you responded. Results matter, but reactions reveal more. You replay moments where restraint was tested, ego wanted to speak, where impulse wanted control. And you notice something quietly dangerous. Resisting impulse feels good now. Not exciting, not dramatic, grounding. You are no longer addicted to stimulation. Chaos doesn't entertain you. Conflict doesn't energize you. You've tasted composure under pressure, and nothing compares. This is where your presence begins to unsettle others. It's not because you were hostile, but because you are unreadable. People rely on predictable reactions to feel safe. When you remove those reactions, they lose leverage. You don't mirror emotions anymore. You observe them. You let others escalate while you remain still. You let silence stretch. You let discomfort exist. And discomfort exposes truth. You begin to see who is confident and who is performing, who is stable and who is fragile, who seeks dominance and who possesses it naturally. You learn something critical. Truly dangerous people do not rush to assert themselves. They let others reveal weakness first. Your nights become quieter, thoughts fewer, more deliberate. You don't replay conversations obsessively anymore. Something needs correcting. You note it. It doesn't, you release it. Mental clutter fades, sleep deepens, and with deeper sleep comes sharper waking hours. Your awareness increases. Your intuition strengthens. You start sensing situations before they fully unfold. Not mystically. Patterns repeat. Humans are predictable. You don't hate this. You don't exploit it unnecessarily. You simply respect it. Power without restraint is reckless. Power with restraint is dominance. You no longer feel the need to prove toughness. Pain is no longer an enemy, but it's no longer romanticized either. You endure what is necessary. Nothing more, nothing less. This precision carries into your body. Your movements are efficient. Your training, physical or mental, becomes purposeful. No wasted reps, no mindless effort. Every action serves an outcome. At night, as you slow your breathing, there is a quiet understanding. You have crossed a line most never reach. You are no longer motivated by fear of weakness. You are guided by respect for strength. That shift changes everything. I sleep, knowing that tomorrow will bring resistance. And, instead of dreading it, you welcome it. Resistance confirms alignment. It proves you are no longer drifting. You are holding your line. This is not intensity. This is composure under sustained pressure. In sustained pressure is where dangerous people are made. There comes a point where the internal struggle goes quiet, not because it is over, but because it has been resolved. You no longer debate with yourself at night. You no longer bargain with weakness. The hierarchy inside you is clear. Discipline leads, emotion follows. This is rare. Most people live in constant internal negotiation. They argue with themselves about effort, about consistency, about standards. You don't. The decision was made earlier, long before comfort tried to renegotiate terms. Okay? Now, when resistance appears, you move automatically. You begin to understand that danger is not a state you enter. It is a baseline you maintain. And maintenance requires respect. Respect for routine. Respect for limits. Respect for recovery. At night, lying still, you assess your energy rather than your mood. Mood is unreliable. Energy tells the truth. You learn when to push and when to hold, when to sharpen and when to preserve. Reckless force burns out quickly. Controlled pressure lasts. This is where patience becomes lethal. You stop rushing outcomes. You stop needing immediate confirmation. You stop measuring progress emotionally. Instead, you track behavior. Did you show up? Did you execute cleanly? Did you maintain composure when tested? If yes, the day was a success. Nothing else matters. You begin to feel a quiet separation from the noise of the world. Its trends, opinions, outrage cycles, they no longer pull you in, not because you are above them, but because you are busy maintaining alignment. Distraction is expensive. You know its cost. This makes you appear distant to some, cold even. But distance is not disconnection. It is selectivity. You choose carefully where your attention goes. You choose carefully who has access to your thoughts. This protects your edge. At night, when memories surface, and they still do, they no longer sting. They inform. Every past failure becomes a reminder of why structure matters, why emotion must be governed, why intensity without direction is useless. You don't resent the past version of yourself. You respect him. He survived long enough to build this version. That respect creates stability. You also begin to see something unsettling. Many people don't actually want strength. They want relief. They want reassurance. They want safety without responsibility. Okay? When they sense you no longer operate that way, they may try to pull you back. They will test boundaries. They will provoke reactions. They will question your calm. You don't react. You let behavior reveal intent. You let silence do the work. You let consistency answer questions that words never could. This is composure at scale. Your sleep reflects it. There is less tossing, less mental noise. You fall asleep faster because there is nothing unresolved. You did what you said you would do. You held your standards. You didn't betray yourself for comfort. That is the deepest form of rest. And when you wake, there is no dramatic surge of motivation, just readiness, calm readiness, the kind that doesn't spike or crash. You begin to trust yourself under pressure, and that trust is dangerous, because a person who trusts their ability to endure does not panic. They do not rush. They do not fold when circumstances tighten. They wait. They observe. They act deliberately. This is where fear loses its leverage. Fear feeds on uncertainty, on doubt, on fragmentation. You've removed those variables. You are not fearless. You are prepared. Prepared to remain calm when others escalate. Prepared to stay silent when others overshare. Prepared to move when others hesitate. At night, as sleep takes you, there is no need to visualize dominance anymore. You live it in structure, in restraint, in repetition. You are not trying to be dangerous. You are protecting what made you that way. You have learned how to build power. You have learned how to maintain it. You will learn something more difficult, how to unleash it only when necessary. There is a difference between having power and knowing when to use it. Most people fail here. They either suppress themselves until they rot, or they unleash everything at the first sign of resistance. Both are forms of weakness. You learn a third path. Control does not mean passivity. Strength does not mean hesitation. Strength, precision, timing. This module begins with a hard realization. Not every battle deserves your energy, but some moments demand everything you have. The danger is not in aggression. The danger is in miscalculation. At night, lying still, you begin training judgment. You replay moments where you held back and ask whether restraint was wisdom or fear. You replay moments where you pushed forward and examine whether force was necessary or ego-driven. This analysis is uncomfortable. It exposes blind spots, but that discomfort sharpens perception. You start to recognize patterns, situations that escalate predictably, individuals who probe boundaries to feel powerful, systems designed to exhaust you rather than confront you directly. You stop responding automatically. Instead, you pause. Pauses create space. Space reveals intention. Dangerous people don't rush decisions. They slow situations down until clarity appears. When others speed up emotionally, you decelerate. When voices rise, yours lowers. When tension spikes, your body stays loose. This is not theater. It's leverage. You begin to understand something critical. Power revealed too early loses value. People know exactly what you're capable of. They adapt. They prepare. They defend. True advantage lies in ambiguity. So you stop signaling. You stop warning. You stop explaining. You let capability remain implied. At night, this becomes practice. You visualize scenarios where pressure builds, where disrespect appears, where limits are tested. And you don't imagine immediate retaliation. You imagine observation. First, assessment, calculation. You ask yourself 3 questions. Is action necessary? Is action effective? Is action final? The answer to all 3 is not yes. You wait. Waiting is not weakness. Waiting is dominance deferred. You also learn that unleashing force is not emotional. It's cold, clean, decisive. There is no anger in it. No chaos. No loss of control. Emotion, clouds, execution. So you train emotional neutrality, even in imagined conflict. You breathe slower. You feel the ground. You stay present. You act only when action resolves the situation, not prolongs it. This principle begins to bleed into your waking life. You stop overcommitting. You stop overreacting. You stop correcting people who don't matter. Conserve energy for moments that do. And when one of those moments arrives, you feel it instantly. The body knows. Your posture shifts. Your awareness narrows. Your breathing deepens. There's no rush, no panic, just readiness. Most people miss this feeling because they live in constant low-level anxiety. You don't. You've trained silence long enough to recognize when it breaks. At night, as you lie awake, you realize something unsettling but empowering. You are no longer afraid of confrontation. Not because you seek it, but because you trust your ability to handle it correctly. This trust is dangerous because fear of conflict keeps people small. It makes them tolerate disrespect, erosion, compromise of values. You no longer live there. You also don't chase conflict to prove strength. That need is gone. Strength that needs validation is unstable. Your restraint is not suppression. It's stored force. Stored force is terrifying when released correctly. As sleep approaches, one final realization settles in. You are not learning how to fight. You are learning how to end things, conversations, dynamics, threats, with minimal energy and maximum effect. This is where true danger begins. Once you understand timing, you begin to understand consequence. Every action echoes longer than most people realize. Words linger. Decisions ripple. Force, once applied, cannot be taken back. This awareness makes you careful, not hesitant, but exact. You no longer move to express emotion. You move to create outcomes. Most people act to feel relief. They speak to release tension. They react to discharge discomfort. You've learned that relief is temporary, but consequence is permanent. So you choose consequence deliberately. At night, when the world goes quiet, you replay moments where others acted impulsively. You see how quickly power slipped from their hands, how a single emotional outburst erased years of credibility, how uncontrolled force exposed insecurity instead of strength. You file these observations away, okay? They become rules. Never act to prove. Never act to vent. Never act without clarity. This doesn't make you passive. It makes you surgical. You begin to sense when situations are reaching a point of no return. The subtle cues most people miss become obvious to you now. A shift in tone, a change in posture, a pattern repeating for the last time. This is where danger becomes real, because when you decide to act, there's no hesitation left. The decision has already been made internally. What follows is execution. Clean, direct, final. You don't escalate gradually. You don't trade blows emotionally. You don't linger in conflict. Lingering creates openings. You move once, correctly, and then you disengage. This is unsettling to people. They expect reactions. They expect back and forth, expect noise. When they don't get it, they lose footing. When the situation ends abruptly, without drama, they feel exposed. At night, lying still, you practice this mentally. You imagine situations reaching tension and then stopping, not exploding, stopping. You visualize yourself ending conversations calmly, walking away without explanation, setting boundaries without apology, okay? You are training finality. Finality is rare. Most people leave doors open because they fear isolation, judgment, loss. You've learned that open doors invite repeated violations. You close doors quietly. This discipline begins to change how others interact with you. Not everyone, but enough to notice. People become more careful with their words, more deliberate with their actions, not because you threaten them, but because inconsistency is no longer tolerated. You don't warn twice. At night, this brings peace. There is nothing unresolved. No mental loops. No replaying arguments. You handled what needed handling. You left what didn't deserve energy. Sleep becomes deeper. You also notice something else. When you do act, it costs you very little emotionally. There is no adrenaline crash, no guilt spiral, no rumination. Action aligned with values creates calm, not chaos. This is a dangerous realization because it means you are no longer dependent on emotional feedback to guide behavior. You don't need anger to move. You don't need fear to retreat. You don't need approval to proceed. You act from principle. This principle-based action is almost impossible to manipulate. At night, as your breathing slows, you recognize that unleashing force is not about intensity, it's about certainty. When certainty is present, hesitation disappears. When hesitation disappears, effectiveness multiplies. You are not becoming more aggressive. Oh, you are becoming more decisive. And decisiveness, when paired with restraint, creates a presence that others feel immediately. They may not know why. They may not articulate it, but they adjust. But they sense that lines are real now, that actions have weight. Pushing further will not lead to noise, but to endings. This is where danger matures. Not wild, not volatile, but irreversible. As sleep takes you, one thought remains steady and clear. When you move now, things change. And that is the kind of power most people never touch right now. The difference between restraint and release is no longer theoretical. You've lived it. You felt the cost of holding back too long and the consequences of acting too soon. Experience has carved judgment into you. This is where danger becomes integrated. You no longer think in terms of aggression or passivity. You think in terms of alignment. Does action preserve your structure or compromise it? Does silence protect your edge or erode it? Every choice is filtered through this lens. At night, lying still, you don't imagine fights or victories anymore. You imagine composure under irreversible moments. Moments where words cannot be unsaid. moments where actions define reputation permanently. You practice standing firm without explanation. You visualize the moment after action, not the action itself, the quiet that follows, the absence of chaos. The finality. This trains you to move only when the outcome is worth the cost. Most people act chasing emotion. You act respecting consequence. This makes you slower to anger and faster to resolution. You also begin to notice that many conflicts are not tests of strength, but tests of self-respect. How much will you tolerate? How much will you bend? How long before you abandon your standards to keep peace? You stop negotiating with disrespect, not loudly, not theatrically, but permanently. This does not make life easier. It makes it cleaner. Fewer entanglements, fewer repeated patterns, fewer nights replaying the same scenarios. Your sleep reflects this cleanliness. There is less noise, less tension. You fall asleep with nothing unresolved because you no longer leave things half-handled. You've learned that danger is not explosive, it's conclusive. People who cross you once rarely do it again. Not because of fear, but because clarity replaces ambiguity. Boundaries are understood. Consequences are known. You don't need to announce them. This level of self-trust changes how you move through the world. You walk slower, you speak less, you listen more. Not because you lack confidence, but because you don't need to fill space anymore. Your presence is sufficient. At night, as the dark settles in, you realize that the old fear of being powerless is gone. Not suppressed, gone. In its place is a quiet certainty. Whatever happens, you will respond correctly. This certainty is dangerous because it means you are no longer controlled by external pressure. Opinions don't rush you. Opinions don't shake you. Threats don't corner you. You have internal authority. And internal authority does not require permission. You also understand now why so few people reach this state. It requires sacrificing drama, requires letting go of the addiction to reaction. It requires patience when ego wants release. Most choose noise, cues precision. As sleep approaches, there is no need to affirm strength. You don't repeat mantras. You don't hype yourself up. You simply rest in alignment. Tomorrow may bring challenge, or it may bring nothing. Either way, you are prepared. You have learned when to hold. You have learned when to release. Next, you will face something far more difficult than confrontation. Sustaining danger when success arrives. Success is more dangerous than failure. Failure hardens you. It forces awareness. It strips illusion. But success relaxes vigilance. It convinces you that the edge you built will maintain itself. It won't. This module begins at the moment things start working, when effort finally pays off, when resistance decreases, when the world stops pushing back as hard. This is where most people decay. At night, lying in the dark, you no longer replay fear or conflict. You replay ease, moments where things came easily, moments where discipline could have been skipped without immediate consequence. And you realize something uncomfortable. Comfort whispers louder than fear ever did. Comfort tells you that you've earned rest, that you can loosen standards, that one compromise won't matter. That's how danger dies. You understand now that the edge you built was forged under pressure. Remove the pressure completely, and sharpness fades. So you create your own, not artificially, intelligently. You raise standards instead of lowering effort. You tighten routines when freedom increases. You schedule discipline the same way you once scheduled survival. This feels counterintuitive. Everyone else celebrates. You refine, not because you reject success, but because you refuse to be owned by it. At night, you visualize a version of yourself surrounded by comfort, ease, praise, access. And you watch how that version behaves. Where does laziness try to enter? Where does ego inflate? Where does entitlement whisper? You correct these tendencies in imagination before they become behavior. This is advanced discipline. You stop chasing intensity. You focus on consistency. Success no longer excites you. It confirms alignment, nothing more. You don't spike emotionally when things go well. Emotional spikes create crashes. You stay level. People notice this. They expect excitement, celebration, relaxation. Instead, they see composure, structure, focus. Some admire it. Some resent it. Both are irrelevant. You've learned that success tests identity more than hardship ever could. Hardship demands strength. Success tempts you to abandon it. You don't. Your nights remain deliberate. Sleep is protected. Training continues. Reflection stays sharp. You don't drift just because you can. This restraint creates a different kind of danger. It's a man who doesn't decay when pressure lifts is rare. As sleep takes you, one thought settles in. You didn't build yourself to enjoy success. You built yourself to survive it. Once success stabilizes, a new threat emerges. Identity drift. It doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't confront you directly. It slowly reshapes how you see yourself until the discipline that built you feels unnecessary. Subtle erosion. At night, lying awake, you start noticing how easy it would be to become careless, how quickly routines could loosen, how effortlessly you could begin identifying with outcomes instead of behavior. You interrupt this early. You remind yourself that results are lagging indicators. They reflect past discipline, not current strength. Living off results is how people decay while believing they're still strong. So you return to process. You judge days by execution, not praise, by adherence, not applause. You refuse to let external feedback rewrite internal standards. This is harder now. When nothing is burning, the mind seeks comfort. When fear disappears, ego replaces it. Ego is louder. Ego is seductive. Ego convinces you that you're different now. You don't argue with ego. You ignore it. You anchor identity in routine, in repetition, in actions that feel almost boring but deeply stabilizing. Early mornings, clean structure, quiet discipline. It's the same fundamentals that built you before success ever arrived. At night, you visualize losing everything, not catastrophically, but quietly. You imagine waking up one day, weaker, slower, softer, not because of failure, but because of neglect. This vision keeps you sharp. You also learn to limit exposure. Not everyone needs access to you now. Tension multiplies distraction. Praise dilutes hunger. You curate your environment carefully. This isn't isolation. It's preservation. Dangerous people protect their edge as fiercely as they once chased it. You also begin to see others differently. People who rose quickly and fell quietly. People who mistook momentum for mastery. People who confused opportunity with invincibility. You learn from them without judgment. At night, as your breathing slows, you recognize that success did not change the rules. It only changed the environment. The principles remain unchanged. Structure beats motivation. Consistency beats intensity. Discipline beats talent. These truths don't evolve. They don't care about your status. You sleep well, knowing you didn't loosen standards today, that you didn't trade identity for ease, that you didn't let success soften you into someone unrecognizable. This is how danger survives prosperity. Not by rejecting success, but by refusing to let it rewrite you. By this stage, success no longer excites you, and failure no longer frightens you. Both have revealed their true nature. Neither defines you. Both are environments, not identities. This understanding creates distance. Distance creates clarity. At night, lying still, you no longer rehearse achievements or losses. You rehearse standards. You ask a single question. Did I live according to my structure today? If the answer is yes, the mind rests. If no, correction is planned without emotion. You begin to operate independently of external validation. Praise feels pleasant, but irrelevant. Criticism feels informative, but powerless. You take what is useful and discard the rest. This emotional economy is dangerous because it makes you difficult to manipulate. You don't overcommit to opportunities just because they exist. You don't chase expansion for its own sake. Growth is intentional now, measured, aligned. You understand that unchecked expansion creates fragility. Systems break when stretched without reinforcement. So you reinforce first. At night, you visualize pressure increasing again, not because you fear it, but because you respect it. Pressure is the only honest test. Ease hides weakness. You prepare for pressure before it arrives. This mindset separates you from most people. They react to circumstances. You anticipate them. You build capacity in advance. Sleep becomes deep, steady, unbroken. Not because life is easy, but because nothing is unresolved internally. You know who you are. You know how you operate. You know what you tolerate. That certainty quiets the mind. You also notice something else. You no longer envy anyone. Envy requires comparison. Comparison requires insecurity. You are too grounded for that now. You respect excellence wherever you see it. You study it, but you don't measure yourself against it emotionally. You measure yourself against your own standards. This self-referential discipline is rare. Sleep takes you. You recognize that danger has evolved. It is no longer sharp, only in conflict. It is steady in abundance, calm in recognition, stable in expansion. You have learned how to survive hardship. You have learned how to survive success. Next, you will confront a deeper challenge, becoming dangerous without becoming empty. There is a point where discipline, if left unchecked, becomes hollow. Strength without meaning turns mechanical. Control without purpose turns cold. This is the stage where many powerful individuals quietly lose themselves. You don't. This module begins with a confrontation that cannot be avoided. What is all this for? At night, lying in the dark, the question surfaces without invitation, not in panic, not in despair, in clarity. You have structure, you have control, you have resilience. Strength alone does not anchor identity. Purpose does. You begin to understand that danger without direction is destructive. Not outwardly, inwardly. It erodes connection, strips humanity. It replaces presence with performance. You refuse that trade, so you refine your relationship with power. You stop seeing it as something to wield constantly. You see it as something to protect and deploy in service of something larger than ego. This is uncomfortable. Purpose demands honesty, exposes motives. It asks whether your discipline is rooted in fear of weakness or commitment to something meaningful. You sit with this at night. You don't rush the answer. Rushed purpose becomes ideology. Forced meaning becomes delusion. You let the question work on you. What do you stand for when no one is watching? What would you protect, even if it cost you? What line would you never cross, regardless of outcome? These questions don't inflate you. They ground you. You begin to feel warmth, return to your strength, not softness, clarity, understanding that danger is not about dominance. It's about responsibility. Responsibility for your actions, your influence, your presence. This changes how you move. You are still restrained, still composed, still formidable. But now there is alignment behind it. You don't just resist chaos, you preserve order. At night, this alignment deepens sleep. There is no emptiness beneath the structure, no hollowness behind the discipline. You are not performing strength. You are living it. You also begin to recognize when power is unnecessary, when silence serves better than action, when presence alone is enough. This discernment prevents burnout. Danger with meaning is sustainable. As sleep takes you, one realization settles in. You didn't become dangerous to intimidate the world. You became dangerous to protect what matters. Once purpose enters the structure, your discipline changes tone. It becomes quieter, but deeper, less rigid, more resilient. You are no longer holding yourself together by force alone. You are anchored. This anchoring is subtle, but powerful. At night, lying awake, your thoughts no longer spiral around achievement or control. They orbit meaning. You reflect on impact rather than dominance, on presence rather than performance. You begin to understand that the most dangerous people are not those who seek power, but those who can be trusted with it. Trust starts internally. You hold yourself to standards even when no one would know if you didn't. Not out of fear, out of respect for who you've decided to be. This self-respect stabilizes everything. You don't need to harden further. You need to refine. You need to balance edge with depth, strength with discernment, pressure with compassion, not for weakness, but for humanity. This does not make you less dangerous. It makes you precise. You start noticing that true influence does not come from intimidation. It comes from consistency, from showing up steady, composed, principled. People sense this immediately. Okay? They feel safe or unsettled around you, depending on their alignment. You don't chase either reaction. At night, you revisit moments where force could have been used but wasn't. You see how restraint preserved dignity, how silence protected connection, how walking away maintained integrity. You also revisit moments where action was necessary, where boundaries had to be enforced, where protection required firmness. And you see how acting without malice preserved your center. This is integrated danger. You are not suppressing empathy. You are governing it. You allow yourself to feel, but not to be ruled. You care without compromising structure. This balance is rare. Most people swing between extremes, soft until broken, or hard until empty. You are neither. You are grounded. Your sleep reflects this grounding. There is no inner conflict, no need to justify choices. You know why you do what you do, okay? That clarity quiets the mind faster than exhaustion ever could. As nights pass, you realize something profound. You are no longer driven by what you're running from. You're pulled by what you're building. That shift changes how effort feels, okay? It is no longer resistance. It is expression of values, expression of standards, expression of identity, okay? This is how danger becomes sustainable across a lifetime. Not by becoming harder, but by becoming whole. At this stage, your strength no longer needs armor. It stands on its own. You are not guarded because you are afraid of being hurt. You are guarded because you know what you protect. Its distinction matters. At night, lying still, you notice the absence of inner noise, not emptiness, presence, a grounded awareness that does not demand distraction. You are comfortable in stillness now. Silence no longer feels like a threat. This is integration. You have reconciled discipline with meaning, control with humanity, power with responsibility. Okay, there is no internal split anymore. You don't need to dominate situations to feel secure. You don't need to withdraw to feel safe. You engage fully, but selectively, present, but not entangled. This makes your presence unmistakable. People sense that you are not looking for anything from them. No approval, no submission, no validation. That neutrality creates gravity. It draws respect without demanding it. At night, you reflect less and rest more. The mind no longer needs constant calibration. Your values guide behavior automatically. Decisions align without friction. Okay? This is dangerous simplicity. Complexity breeds hesitation. Simplicity breeds decisiveness. You also recognize that you are no longer proving anything to yourself. The question of, am I strong enough? Okay, has dissolved. You know what you can endure. You've tested it repeatedly. Now, you focus on stewardship. How do you carry this strength without corrupting it? How do you ensure power does not erode empathy? How do you remain human while being formidable? You answer these questions through action, not philosophy, through fairness, through restraint, through consistency. At night, as sleep takes you, there is gratitude, not for comfort, but for alignment. You are no longer divided. You are no longer chasing a version of yourself. You are inhabiting it. You have learned how to build strength. You have learned how to give it meaning. Next, you will face a challenge you anticipate, becoming dangerous without becoming isolated. Isolation is seductive. When you become disciplined, composed, and controlled, distance feels natural. You move differently. You think differently. You tolerate less nonsense. Over time, separation happens without effort. This is where many strong individuals disappear. They mistake solitude for superiority. They confuse independence with detachment. They believe distance is the price of strength. You learn otherwise. This module begins with the realization that arrives quietly at night. Danger that cannot coexist with others eventually turns inward. Power with no connection becomes brittle. Strength without relationship loses context. You don't need everyone, okay? But you do need alignment. At night, lying still, you review your interactions, not to judge others, to audit yourself. Where did you withdraw out of clarity, and where did you withdraw out of avoidance? The difference matters. Avoidance hides behind discipline easily. You learn to separate noise from connection, distraction from relationship, weakness from vulnerability. These distinctions protect you from unnecessary isolation. You understand now that dangerous people are not loners by default. They are selected participants. They engage where values align. They withdraw where standards erode. This is not emotional distancing, structural clarity. You begin practicing presence without compromise, being fully engaged without dissolving boundaries, listening without absorbing chaos, supporting without carrying weight that isn't yours. This is difficult work. It requires restraint in a new form. Restraint from cutting people off prematurely. Restraint from assuming others cannot meet your standards. Restraint from using solitude as armor. At night, you imagine strength expressed in connection, standing firm while remaining open, being unmovable without being unreachable, allowing closeness without surrendering control. This challenges an old belief that power requires isolation. You dismantle that belief carefully. True danger does not hide. It does not withdraw out of fear of contamination. It remains intact even when exposed. K. It can enter environments without being shaped by them. K. This is higher level control. You begin to test this in waking life. You stay present in conversations longer. You allow disagreement without disengagement. You hold your ground calmly instead of retreating into silence. And you notice something surprising? Connection, when navigated with boundaries, does not weaken you. It sharpens discernment. It reveals blind spots. It keeps your strength honest. At night, this reflection deepens sleep. You are no longer guarding against the world. You are navigating it deliberately. You realize isolation was a phase, not a destination. A tool for refinement, not a permanent posture. Danger that cannot relate becomes rigid. Danger that can relate becomes adaptable. And adaptability is survival at scale. As sleep settles in, one thought remains steady. You are not becoming strong to stand alone forever. You are becoming strong enough to stand anywhere without losing yourself. Once you re-enter connection deliberately, a new challenge appears. Influence, when you're no longer reactive. When your presence is calm and grounded, people begin to adjust around you, sometimes subtly, sometimes unconsciously. Your stability becomes a reference point. This is responsibility. At night, lying awake, you reflect on how your energy affects others, not from guilt, from awareness. Power does not end at self-control. It extends into environment, okay? Into tone, into pace, into what you allow and what you interrupt, okay? You begin to see that dangerous people don't just protect themselves, they stabilize what they touch. This doesn't mean fixing people. It means not amplifying chaos, not feeding volatility, not rewarding dysfunction with attention. You learn to slow rooms down. The conversations escalate. You don't escalate with them. You speak less. You lower your tone. You introduce pauses. This alone shifts dynamics. People mirror what they feel safe around. At night, you visualize presence as pressure without force. You imagine walking into situations already tense and feeling them soften not because you dominate, but because you don't add friction. This is rare. Most people contribute noise without realizing it. You remove it. You also learn when influence is not yours to apply. Not every situation is yours to stabilize. Not every person wants calm. Some are invested in chaos. You recognize this early now, and you step back without resentment. This discernment preserves energy. Connection no longer drains you because you no longer overextend. You don't carry what isn't yours. You don't absorb emotions that don't belong to you. You stay present without becoming responsible for outcomes you didn't create. At night, this brings relief. You are engaged, but not entangled. Involved, but not consumed. You begin to understand that isolation was once necessary to build structure, but now structure allows connection without collapse. You can be close without losing form. This balance deepens your danger because people trust those who are strong enough to remain calm in proximity. They feel it immediately. Your presence doesn't demand attention, but it commands respect. You don't seek loyalty, you create clarity. People choose how close they come. At night, as sleep approaches, you recognize a quiet evolution. You are no longer managing yourself just to survive. You are managing yourself to lead by example, whether you choose to lead or not. And leadership, real leadership, is simply self-control made visible. This is how danger integrates into the world, not through isolation, but through controlled presence. By now, connection no longer feels like a threat to your strength, it feels like a test of it. And you are no longer afraid of tests. You welcome them because they reveal whether what you built is real. At night, lying still, you reflect on how far you've come. There was a time when people drained you because you had no boundaries. Then a time when you withdrew because boundaries felt fragile. Now, boundaries are internal. They don't require distance to exist. This is maturity. You no longer disappear to protect your edge. You carry your edge with you. It stays intact in conversation, in conflict, in closeness. You don't need to harden when people get close. You don't need to soften to be accepted. You remain yourself. This is rare. Most people change shape depending on who they're around. They adjust tone, values, energy. You don't. Your consistency becomes your signature. People know what version of you they'll get. Calm, grounded, deliberate. This consistency creates trust, not emotional dependence. Structural trust, okay? People know you won't escalate unnecessarily, okay? They know you won't betray yourself to please them, okay? They know where you stand, even when you say little. At night, you replay moments of connection, not to analyze others, but to confirm alignment. Did you stay present without compromising standards? Did you listen without absorbing chaos? Did you speak only when it mattered? Yes, the mind rests easily. You also accept something fully now. Not everyone will stay. Some people were meant for earlier versions of you. Their absence is not loss, it's accuracy. You don't chase. You don't resent. You allow separation without story. Dangerous people don't cling. They allow reality to sort itself out. This acceptance creates space for higher quality connection. Fewer people, cleaner dynamics, less noise, more depth. You no longer mistake quantity for richness. At night, this brings a different kind of peace, not solitude, clarity. Know who belongs in your orbit and who doesn't, and you are at peace with both. You've also learned when to step forward. Your presence is needed, when silence would feel like avoidance instead of restraint. You no longer confuse withdrawal with wisdom. You engage when engagement protects values. You disengage when disengagement preserves structure. This discernment makes you effective. You are no longer dangerous only in confrontation. You are dangerous in stability. in the ability to remain yourself regardless of environment, in the refusal to fracture under proximity. As sleep approaches, one final realization from this phase settles in. You are not strong because you stand alone. You are strong because you can stand connected without bending, without disappearing, without losing form. This is the end of Module 6. You have learned how to build strength. You have learned how to give it meaning. You have learned how to share space without losing yourself. Next, you will face a challenge that tests everything you've built. What happens when the world finally tries to break you on purpose? There is a difference between random hardship and deliberate pressure. Random hardship is chaotic. It arrives without pattern. Deliberate pressure is targeted. It arrives with intent. This is where you are headed. At some point, the world stops testing you accidentally and starts testing you on purpose. Not because you invited it, but because your stability has become visible. Because your composure disrupts fragile systems. Because your refusal to bend exposes weakness in others. This is not paranoia. It's pattern recognition. At night, lying awake, you sense it before it fully manifests. The resistance feels sharper, more focused, less clumsy. The challenges are no longer obvious. They are strategic. Silence where there used to be praise. Delays where there used to be support. Pressure applied indirectly instead of head-on. This is a different game, and most people fail here because they misinterpret it. They think something is wrong with them. They panic, or they overcorrect. They explain themselves to people who don't deserve explanations. You don't. You've trained too long for that. You understand now that deliberate pressure is confirmation. It means you are no longer invisible. It means your presence matters enough to be challenged. Dangerous people don't react emotionally to this phase. They tighten structure. At night, you don't replay insults or setbacks. You audit systems. Where are you exposed? Where are you relying on goodwill instead of leverage? Where are you assuming fairness in a world that responds to strength? This is not cynicism. This is realism. You stop assuming protection. You start building redundancy. You remove single points of failure. You ensure that if one door closes, you are already moving through another. This mindset changes everything. You become quieter, not withdrawn, precise. You share less information, reduce unnecessary visibility. You let others underestimate your preparation. Ambiguity becomes armor. At night, you visualize pressure increasing gradually. You don't imagine collapse. You imagine compression. You see yourself staying calm as variables tighten. You see yourself adapting without panic. You see yourself absorbing hits without signaling damage. This is critical. People apply pressure to provoke reaction. Reaction reveals vulnerability. You give them nothing. You also recognize when pressure is designed to exhaust rather than confront. Endless meetings, repeated questions, shifting expectations. The goal is not resolution. You don't play that game. You don't play that game. You simplify, you reduce engagement. You conserve energy ruthlessly. You do not confuse activity with effectiveness. Danger under pressure is not about pushing harder. It's about leaking less. At night, as you lie still, you feel something different from fear. Readiness, a grounded certainty that whatever's coming, you will not fracture internally. You may lose resources. You may lose position. You may lose comfort, but you will not lose composure. And composure is the one thing pressure cannot take unless you give it away. You also accept a hard truth here. Some tests are meant to remove people, not refine them. Relationships will break. Opportunities will vanish. Paths will close permanently. You let them. You've learned that clinging under pressure is weakness. Release under pressure is control. This is where dangerous people separate from resilient ones. Resilient people endure. Dangerous people adapt and reposition. At night, as sleep finally approaches, one thought remains steady and unshaken. If the world is trying to break you on purpose, it means you are no longer someone it can ignore. And you are ready for for what comes next. Once deliberate pressure begins, you are forced to confront a brutal reality. Fairness is optional. Systems protect what they depend on, not what is right. People support what benefits them, not what is true. This realization hardens many into bitterness. You choose clarity instead. At night, lying still, you stop asking whether pressure is justified. You stop seeking validation for your experience. Validation creates dependence. Dependence creates leverage against you. You remove it. You begin to operate under a new assumption. Nothing is guaranteed, and everything must be earned repeatedly. This doesn't make you anxious. It makes you alert. Alert without panic. You also stop explaining yourself to hostile environments. Explanation is a form of exposure. It reveals strategy, emotion, and priority. Cued under deliberate pressure, silence is safer than transparency. You speak only when words advance position. This restraint frustrates those applying pressure. They want reaction. They want clarification. They want you to reveal where it hurts. You don't. At night, you visualize containment. See pressure applied externally while your internal state remains sealed. You imagine hits landing without penetrating. You imagine setbacks without identity loss. This mental rehearsal is critical. Most people collapse under deliberate pressure, not because of the pressure itself, but because it attacks their self-image. They start asking, "What does this say about me?" That question is a trap. You don't ask it. You ask, "What does this require of me now?" That question leads to action. You adjust expectations downward and standards upward. You assume less support and demand more from yourself. This eliminates surprise. Surprise is what breaks people. You also learn to stop seeking resolution. Some pressures are not meant to be resolved quickly. They are meant to test endurance. You stop trying to end a storm and focus on staying operational within it. This shift is dangerous because it means pressure no longer controls your tempo. You control it. Okay? At night, you feel fatigue. Real fatigue, but not despair. Fatigue is information. It tells you where to rest, where to rotate effort, where to reinforce. You listen without complaint. You also begin to recognize allies, not the loud ones, not the enthusiastic ones, the consistent ones. It's the few who remain steady when pressure rises. You don't cling to them, you note them. Loyalty is observed, not demanded. This clarity sharpens sleep. You rest, knowing you are not alone, but also not dependent. You have options. You have adaptability. You also accept something difficult. Winning under deliberate pressure often looks like surviving longer than expected. T is not glamorous. It is not celebrated. Key, it is quiet persistence. You are comfortable with that. At night, as sleep approaches, one realization settles in deeply. Pressure no longer defines you. Your response to it does. And your response has been trained in silence, discipline, and restraint long before the world decided to test you. This is how dangerous people remain standing when others unravel. Eventually, deliberate pressure reaches a point where it demands a choice. Not between comfort and discomfort, but between integrity and survival. This is the phase where shortcuts appear. Compromises are offered. Relief is dangled in exchange for silence, compliance, or alignment with something that violates your core. Okay, this is the real test. At night, lying awake, you sense it clearly. The pressure is no longer just about endurance. It's about who you are willing to become to make it stop. Most people fail here, quietly. They rationalize. They tell themselves it's temporary. Care that they'll return to their standards later. Later rarely comes. You don't negotiate with identity. You've spent too long building internal authority to sell it cheaply. You understand that survival purchased through self-betrayal is not survival. It's delay. So you choose the harder path. At night, you rehearse this decision without drama. You imagine saying no without explanation. You imagine loss without collapse. You imagine standing firm while options narrow. This is terrifying for most people. For you, it is grounding. because you know exactly who you are when everything else is stripped away. You also understand that some pressures are designed to expose this moment. They exist to see whether you will fold when consequences become real. You let that test complete itself. You don't rush to resolve it. You let truth reveal outcomes. This level of composure unsettles those applying pressure. They expect desperation. They expect bargaining. They expect visible strain. You give them none. At night, your sleep may shorten, but it deepens. At ease, there is less mental noise because there's no internal argument. The decision has been made. There is nothing to negotiate. You may lose position. You may lose opportunity. You may lose proximity to comfort. But you do not lose yourself. And that is the most dangerous outcome of all, because people who cannot be coerced cannot be controlled. You also recognize that this phase leaves scars. It changes how you see systems, people, and promises. You don't become cynical, but you become precise. You trust selectively. You verify quietly. This is not bitterness. This is calibration. At night, as you lie still, there is a strange peace beneath the tension. The peace of alignment. The peace of knowing that regardless of outcome, you are intact. This is the kind of peace pressure cannot touch. This is the end of Module 7. You have learned how to endure pressure. You have learned how to adapt under pressure. You have learned how to remain intact when pressure turns personal. Next, you will enter a phase few talk about. What happens after you survive what was meant to break you? Surviving what was meant to break you creates a silence no one prepares you for. Not relief, not celebration. Silence. The noise of pressure fades. The tension that wants to find your days loosens its grip. And suddenly, there is space. Space where fear used to live. Space where urgency once ruled. This is dangerous territory because many people mistake this quiet for emptiness. They rush to fill it. Taste stimulation, validation, conflict, anything to feel alive again. They become addicted to struggle because struggle became their identity. You don't. At night, lying in the dark, you recognize the silence for what it is. Aftermath, the calm after a system resets. It's the moment where identity must evolve again or stagnate. You ask a harder question now. Not, can I survive? But who am I without the fight? This question is unsettling. The fight gave you structure. It gave you purpose. It gave you clarity. Without it, you must generate those things internally, without opposition, forcing them into existence. This is where many strong people drift. They lower standards without realizing it. They chase unnecessary battles. They recreate chaos to feel sharp again. They confuse readiness with restlessness. You choose differently. You treat the quiet as a phase of consolidation. You don't rush expansion. Don't rush exposure. You let systems stabilize. Let habits settle into something sustainable. At night, your reflection shifts. You no longer replay threats or pressure. You replay lessons. What worked? What failed? What almost broke you? What didn't? You extract principles. Principles are what remain when circumstances disappear. You refine your routines again. Not harder, cleaner, less excess, more intention. You remove behaviors that were useful only in survival mode. You keep what scales into peace. This is subtle work. Survival demands intensity. Stability demands precision. You begin to understand that danger after survival is quieter, less reactive, less visible. You don't need to prove resilience anymore. It's been proven now. You protect it. At night, you visualize future pressure, not with dread, but with neutrality. You know it will come again. It always does, but you also know you don't need to live in constant readiness. Hypervigilance erodes clarity. You learn to stand down without disarming. Its balance is rare. You also notice how others respond to your calm. Some are drawn to it. Others are unsettled by it. They expect intensity. They expect sharp edges. Instead, they encounter steadiness. Steadiness is intimidating to people who live on adrenaline. You don't explain this. You don't justify your calm. You let it exist. At night, sleep becomes deeper, slower, more restorative. Not because life is easy, but because nothing inside you is bracing for impact. You are no longer living in anticipation of collapse. This does not make you soft. It makes you dangerous in a new way. Because now, when pressure returns, it won't find you exhausted. It won't find you desperate. It won't find you fragmented. It will find you whole. This is the beginning of a different phase, one where strength is no longer forged by threat, but maintained by choice. And as sleep takes you, one truth settles quietly, but firmly. You didn't just survive what was meant to break you. You learned how to live after it. After survival, discipline must change shape again. What once kept you alive can now suffocate you if left untouched. The habits built under pressure were designed for resistance, not for longevity. You recognize this before it becomes a problem. At night, lying awake, you feel the difference. The tension that once sharpened you would now dull you if you held on to it. So, you loosen, not standards, but grip. You allow ease without indulgence. You allow rest without decay. This is intelligent restraint. You begin auditing your life again, not through fear, but through sustainability. Which behaviors are still necessary? Which ones were only useful when the world was hostile? Which ones drain more than they protect? You remove what no longer serves without nostalgia. This is difficult for many, okay? Peeled habits feel sacred. Suffering becomes identity. Letting go feels like betrayal, okay? But you understand something critical. Clinging to survival mode after danger passes creates self-inflicted pressure. You don't romanticize struggle anymore. At night, your mind is quieter, but sharper. Less noise, more clarity. You are not scanning for threats constantly. You are scanning for alignment. Are your actions proportional to reality? Are you responding to the present or reacting to a past that no longer exists? This distinction saves you. You also notice how calm exposes new weaknesses. Without chaos, distractions become obvious. Restlessness appears. A subtle urge to create problems, just to feel engaged. You don't indulge it. You sit with boredom. You let stillness stretch. You train patience at a deeper level than before. Anyone can endure pain. Few can endure peace without sabotaging it. This is advanced discipline. At night, you visualize long timelines now. Not survival horizons, but decades. You ask different questions. What habits protect clarity long term? What pace preserves strength without erosion? What relationships reinforce stability instead of draining it? You start choosing slower wins, cleaner progress, less volatility. Your life becomes harder to shake because it is no longer built on adrenaline. People may misinterpret this phase. They may think you've softened, slowed down, lost edge. No better. You've shifted from sharpness to solidity. This solidity makes you dangerous in environments where others burn out. While they spike and crash, you remain operational. While they react emotionally to boredom or frustration, you stay centered. At night, sleep reflects this evolution. You don't collapse into it anymore. You enter it calmly. There is no unfinished war inside you, just maintenance, adjustment, quiet, strengthening. You also recognize a new responsibility, protecting this state, not aggressively, deliberately. You avoid unnecessary drama. You step away from cycles that feed on chaos. You stop engaging in conversations that exist only to provoke emotion. But hey, this is not avoidance. It is efficiency. Danger after survival is about endurance, the ability to remain effective when nothing is forcing you to be. It's the ability to stay sharp without suffering. Sleep takes you. One realization settles with certainty. You are no longer strong because you endured hell. You are strong because you learned how not to live there forever. Eventually, you realize something that changes how you see strength forever. The goal was never to live in survival, nor was it to escape struggle completely. The goal was to become someone who can pass through any phase without losing form. At night, lying still, there is no longer a need to scan your life for threats or tests. You've accepted that pressure will return in different shapes at different times, not as punishment, as part of existence. And because you've integrated survival, pressure no longer feels personal. This detachment is powerful. You no longer ask, why is this happening again? You ask, what does this phase require? That question keeps you adaptive. You also notice that your relationship with rest has matured. Rest is no longer recovery from damage. It is maintenance of capacity. You protect it intentionally, not indulgently. You sleep to preserve clarity, not to escape reality. At night, your thoughts are fewer but deeper. You think in principles now, not scenarios. You don't replay specific events. You refine frameworks, how you decide, how you respond, how you maintain internal order regardless of circumstance. This is dangerous simplicity. You also become aware that many people never reach this stage. They either remain trapped in survival mode, always tense, always braced, or they collapse into comfort, mistaking ease for peace. You walk between those extremes, calm but alert, relaxed but structured, open but uncompromised. This balance gives you a presence that feels difficult to categorize. You are not intense, yet you command attention. You are not aggressive, yet you are not to be tested lightly. You are not distant, yet you are not easily influenced. At night, this awareness doesn't inflate you. It grounds you. Ego dissolves when identity stabilizes. You don't need to feel special. You need to remain aligned. You also accept that this phase is quieter. There are fewer dramatic moments, fewer defining battles. Progress becomes less visible to others, but more permanent within you. This is where many lose interest. You don't? You understand that invisible stability outlasts visible intensity. You commit to the unglamorous work of maintenance, of showing up the same way whether anyone notices or not. At night, you don't seek affirmation from memory or imagination. You don't replay victories. You don't rehearse dominance. You simply review alignment and let the mind rest. That rest is earned, and it is deep. Sleep finally settles in. One final truth from this phase anchors itself quietly but firmly. You are no longer defined by what tried to break you. You are defined by what couldn't move you afterward. This is the end of Module 8. You have learned how to survive pressure. You have learned how to live after it. Next, you will enter the most misunderstood phase of all. What it means to remain dangerous when nothing is at stake. When nothing is at stake, most people decay. Without pressure, they loosen. Without threat, they drift. Without urgency, they forget who they had to become to survive. This is the phase where strength quietly evaporates, not through failure, but through neglect. You are here now, not because life is easy, but because nothing is demanding transformation anymore. No crisis, no enemy, no countdown. It's days that arrive and leave without resistance. This is the most deceptive test of all. At night, lying in the dark, you feel it. The absence of friction, the temptation to coast, a subtle voice that says, you've earned this. You can relax now, not rest. Relax. Let go of edge. Let go of structure. Let go of vigilance. Recognize this voice immediately. It sounds harmless. It sounds reasonable. It sounds like comfort. Okay, but you know what it costs. Danger without stakes is discipline without adrenaline. And discipline without adrenaline exposes whether your strength was built on necessity or on identity. Most people only rise when forced. When nothing pushes them, they collapse inward. They become soft versions of themselves, still talking about who they used to be. You refuse that future. At night, you shift the frame. You stop asking, what do I need to survive? Start asking, what kind of man do I refuse to stop being? This question doesn't depend on circumstance. It doesn't wait for crisis. It demands consistency. Consistency without reward is the real proof. You maintain standards when no one is watching. You train when no one would notice if you didn't. You stay sharp without needing a reason. Not out of fear, out of respect for the structure you built. This is rare. You also notice how boredom tries to undermine you. When nothing is at stake, the mind seeks stimulation, drama, conflict, excess. People sabotage themselves here without realizing it. They create problems to feel alive again. You don't. You sit with boredom. You let it pass. You understand that boredom is not emptiness. It is unused capacity. Okay? An unused capacity, when directed, becomes mastery. At night, you visualize yourself maintaining edge in a calm environment, not tightening, not bracing. Simply staying precise, clean habits, clear boundaries, quiet execution. This is dangerous in a different way, because when pressure eventually returns, and it always does, you will not need time to sharpen. You will already be ready. While others scramble to remember who they were under fire, you will simply continue. You also realize that this phase reveals true character, not the version shaped by fear, not the version shaped by survival, but the version that exists when nothing is forcing your hand. This version is chosen. At night, as sleep approaches, there is no anticipation of battle, no need to rehearse resilience, just a steady commitment to remain intact. This is where danger becomes permanent. Not because you are preparing for something, but because you have decided who you are, even when nothing is at stake. When nothing is at stake, clarity becomes the enemy of excuses. There is no crisis to blame, no pressure to point at, no urgency to hide behind. It's just you and the truth of your standards. At night, lying awake, you notice how clean the silence is. It's not heavy, it's not threatening, honest. And in that honesty, a question surfaces that can't be ignored. If no one is watching, do you still choose discipline? This is where identity either solidifies or dissolves. Most people outsource discipline to circumstance. They wait for pain to force growth. They wait for deadlines to force focus. They wait for fear to force action. When those forces disappear, so does their structure. You don't let that happen. You understand now that danger without stakes must be self-generated, not through artificial stress or unnecessary hardship, but through standards that do not negotiate with comfort. You create internal pressure. At night, you review your day without drama. No judgment, no emotion, just facts. Did you act according to your values when you could have coasted? Did you maintain structure when ease invited decay? Did you choose precision when sloppiness would have gone unnoticed? These questions don't accuse, they clarify. And clarity is uncomfortable for people who rely on excuses. You begin to feel a quiet pride in doing the unrequired, in staying sharp when no one demands it, maintaining posture when no one would punish collapse. This pride is different from ego. Ego needs witnesses. This doesn't. It's self-respect. You also recognize how dangerous this phase is for others. Without stakes, people drift into indulgence disguised as rest. They overconsume, overreact, over-identify with pleasure. And slowly, imperceptibly, they become fragile again. You refuse that regression. You don't demonize comfort. You regulate it. Comfort becomes something you use, not something that uses you. Rest is scheduled. Enjoyment is intentional. Excess is noticed early. At night, you visualize pressure returning unexpectedly. A crisis, a loss, a sudden demand. And you imagine yourself responding without scrambling, without panic, without needing to rebuild discipline from scratch. This visualization reinforces a core truth. Readiness maintained is cheaper than readiness rebuilt. You'll also notice how your relationship with time changes. Without stakes, time stretches. Days feel longer. Can either dissolve discipline or deepen mastery. Can you choose mastery? You slow down without losing edge. You do fewer things, but do them better. You remove urgency without removing intent. This creates a presence that feels almost unsettling, calm, but awake. People around you may not understand it. They may ask why you're still so structured when life seems stable, why you don't relax more, why you don't drift like everyone else. If you don't explain, explanation is unnecessary when identity is settled. At night, your sleep reflects this stability. You don't crash into bed exhausted from chaos. You enter sleep deliberately, knowing there is nothing you avoided during the day. No standards compromised, no corners cut. This is the kind of rest that doesn't dull you, it sharpens you. You also realize something subtle but important. This phase strips away external motivation completely. There is no applause, no urgency, no visible reward. If discipline remains, it is because it belongs to you now. Not as a tool, not as a response, as a trait. This is dangerous permanence, because traits do not wait for permission. As sleep takes you, one thought anchors itself without emotion or effort. You are no longer disciplined because you have to be. You are disciplined because anything else would be beneath who you decided to become. By this point, danger no longer feels sharp, feels settled, embedded, like posture instead of tension, like awareness instead of vigilance. You are not on guard anymore. You are simply awake. At night, lying still, you don't review your day searching for threats or mistakes. You review alignment. Is your presence clean? Was your effort honest? Was your restraint intentional? These questions answer themselves quickly now. There is very little internal debate left. That is the mark of permanence. You begin to realize that most people fear this stage, not because it is hard, but because it is quiet. There is nothing dramatic to hide behind, no hardship to blame, no victory to celebrate, just repetition, just consistency, just being the same person regardless of circumstance. This terrifies people who rely on chaos to feel alive. 2. You've learned that boredom is not the absence of meaning, it's the absence of distraction. And without distraction, truth becomes unavoidable. You sit with it comfortably now. Your discipline no longer feels like effort. It feels like hygiene, something you do automatically because not doing it would feel wrong. You don't push yourself anymore. You simply don't allow decay. This changes how you experience time. Weeks pass without noticeable spikes or crashes. Progress is subtle but undeniable. You don't chase milestones. You accumulate integrity, day by day, choice by choice. At night, your mind rests easily because nothing inside you is split. You are not one person under pressure and another at ease. You are the same either way. This unity is dangerous because fragmentation is how people are controlled. When someone needs pressure to perform, removing pressure removes competence. You are no longer dependent on environment. You carry your standard with you. You also recognize that at this stage, very few people can influence you emotionally. Not because you are closed, but because you are complete. Opinions pass through without sticking. Praise doesn't inflate. Criticism doesn't destabilize. You listen, you assess, you decide. That's it. At night, you sometimes reflect on who you were before all of this began. Not with regret, with distance. That version of you did what he could with what he had. He needed chaos to grow. You no longer do. This doesn't make you superior. It makes you finished with becoming. Now, you maintain. Maintenance is unglamorous, invisible, repetitive, and that is why it works. Nothing erodes quietly like neglect, and nothing endures quietly like care. You understand now that danger at its highest level is not about capacity, it's about reliability. It's a certainty that when something matters, you will respond correctly, not emotionally, not impulsively, but in alignment. At night, this certainty doesn't excite you. It calms you. Sleep settles in. The final realization of this phase lands without force, without trauma, without resistance. You are no longer dangerous because of what you might do. You are dangerous because of what you will never do again. This is the end of Module 9. You have learned how to remain sharp without stakes. You have learned how to maintain discipline without pressure. Next, you will enter the final evolution, what it means to be dangerous and invisible. There is a final evolution most never reach, not because it is difficult, but because it offers no applause, no recognition, no proof to show the world. This is the phase where danger no longer needs to be visible to exist. Invisibility is misunderstood. People associate it with weakness, retreat, irrelevance. They think disappearing means giving up power. In reality, invisibility is what power looks like when it no longer needs validation. At night, lying in the dark, you understand this instinctively. You feel no urge to announce progress, no desire to signal strength, no need to remind anyone who you are or what you're capable of. You've learned that the most dangerous forces in the world are quiet until they move. Visibility creates expectation. Expectation creates countermeasures. When people know your direction, they prepare against it. When they underestimate you, they give you space. You choose space. This does not mean you shrink. It means you remove unnecessary exposure. You stop volunteering information. You stop narrating your life. Stop explaining your discipline, your standards, your intentions. Explanation is for those who need permission a lot. At night, you reflect on how much energy you once spent being seen, proving growth, defending choices, correcting misconceptions. All of it, noise, all of it, friction. You release it. Invisibility sharpens execution. Fewer eyes means fewer distractions, fewer opinions, fewer forces trying to shape your behavior. You regain full ownership of your pace. This is where control deepens. You still move, you still build, you still prepare. But you do it without broadcasting, without timelines, without public commitment. You allow results to arrive before attention. This frustrates people who rely on visibility to feel real. They don't understand how you can work without being witnessed. You don't explain. At night, you visualize impact without footprint, change without announcement. See yourself influencing outcomes indirectly, positioning quietly, cading decisively only when necessary. This is strategic humility, not shrinking, not hiding. It's positioning beneath the surface. You also realize that invisibility protects you from yourself. Ego feeds on attention. Attention distorts judgment. By staying unseen, you remove the temptation to perform instead of execute. This is dangerous self-awareness. You don't reject recognition when it arrives organically, but you don't chase it. Chasing visibility pulls focus outward. You keep it inward. At night, your sleep becomes lighter but deeper. Fewer thoughts, less mental noise. Nothing to defend, nothing to impress. You are no longer preparing for confrontation. You are preparing for inevitability. When action is required, you will move. Until then, you remain still. Stillness is not stagnation. Stillness is loaded as sleep takes you. One truth settles quietly and completely. You are no longer dangerous because you are seen. You are dangerous because you are ready and no one knows when you will move. Once you embrace invisibility, your relationship with power becomes almost paradoxical. You have more of it, yet you display less. You are capable of more, yet you reveal less. This restraint is not forced. It feels natural now. At night, lying still, you notice how little there is to defend. When you stop projecting identity outward, there is nothing for others to attack. Opinions lose traction. Provocation loses leverage. You move freely because you are no longer anchored to perception. This freedom is dangerous. You begin to understand that most conflict is fueled by visibility. People argue with what they can see. They compete with what they can measure. When you remove yourself from that plane, you exit many battles before they begin. This doesn't make you passive. It makes you selective. At night, you review interactions with a new lens. Did this require presence, or did it only demand reaction? Many situations dissolve when reaction is withheld. You let them dissolve. You also become harder to predict, not because you are erratic, but because you are not signaling intent. Predictability is comfortable for others. It allows them to prepare responses. You remove that comfort. Ambiguity protects momentum. You don't telegraph decisions. You don't announce changes. You simply execute when alignment is complete. People experience the result, not the process. This is unsettling to those who rely on anticipation to feel in control. At night, you visualize long arcs of progress unfolding quietly. No rush, no announcement, just consistent movement beneath the surface. This visualization reinforces patience. You are no longer addicted to immediacy. You also recognize how invisibility cleans motivation. Without an audience, there is no applause to chase. Effort becomes pure. You do things because they matter, not because they will be seen. This is integrity at scale. Your discipline remains intact because it is no longer performing. It is functioning. It's like a system that runs whether or not anyone is watching. At night, your sleep reflects this simplicity. No mental rehearsals, no internal speeches, just rest, just readiness. You also begin to notice how others behave around you. Some try to draw you out. They ask questions. They provoke opinions. They seek confirmation of who you are. You remain neutral, not evasive, not secretive. Neutral neutrality denies leverage. You answer only what is necessary. You engage only where it matters. You don't correct misconceptions unless they affect outcomes. Let people believe what they want, okay? Belief does not change capacity. At night, one more realization settles in. Invisibility does not mean absence. It means controlled presence, okay? You are exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what needs to be done without interference, okay? This is how power moves when it no longer needs to prove itself. As sleep takes you, the thought lands without emotion, without tension. You are no longer trying to be dangerous. You are simply positioned to be effective and unseen until effectiveness becomes unavoidable. At this stage, invisibility is no longer a tactic. It is your natural state. You are not hiding. You are simply no longer announcing yourself. The world doesn't need to know what you are becoming until it has to deal with the result. At night, lying still, you feel no urgency, no desire to accelerate timelines, no need to rush outcomes. Everything is already moving, quietly, precisely, on your terms. This patience is lethal. Most people rush because they fear being forgotten. You no longer need to be remembered in advance. You are comfortable letting impact introduce you. You also understand something crucial now. Visibility invites negotiation. When people see you coming, they try to shape you, influence you, slow you down. By remaining unseen, you remove negotiation entirely. You don't ask for space. You take it. Can you fill it with preparation? At night, you review your systems one final time. Not obsessively, confidently. They work. They've been tested under pressure, under ease, under silence. They don't depend on mood or motivation. They depend on identity. You are no longer reactive, no longer defensive, no longer eager to engage. Engagement is chosen, not triggered. This makes your presence unpredictable, not chaotic, but exact. When you appear, it matters. When you speak, it lands. When you act, it resolves. This is invisible danger, made visible only at the point of impact. At night, you no longer visualize confrontation or victory. You visualize timing. You imagine waiting without decay, moving without hesitation, stopping without regret. Timing is the final weapon. People who lack discipline act too early. People who lack confidence act too late. You act when alignment is complete. K. And because you've learned how to remain still, silence no longer erodes you, it sharpens you. As sleep settles in, there is no final lesson to extract. No dramatic realization, just a quiet certainty that what you've built does not need constant attention to exist. You have learned how to be dangerous in visibility. You have learned how to be dangerous in silence. You have learned how to be dangerous without being seen. Not about becoming, but about remaining when nothing is left to prove. When nothing is left to prove, a strange temptation appears. Not weakness, not fear. Relief, the kind of relief that whispers, you can finally let go now. The kind that tells you the work is done, the identity is secured, the danger is permanent. This is where legends quietly decay. At night, lying in the dark, there is no noise, no pressure, no external demand. And in that silence, you confront the most subtle threat of all, complacency disguised as peace. You understand immediately that remaining dangerous is harder than becoming dangerous. Becoming requires effort. Remaining requires vigilance without urgency. There is no applause here, no resistance to sharpen you, no enemy to justify discipline, only choice. You begin to see that danger at this stage is no longer forged. It is preserved, like a blade that will rust if left unattended, not from misuse, but from neglect. At night, your thoughts are minimal, but deliberate. You don't ask how far you've come. You ask how easily decay could begin, not with collapse, but with permission. Permission to skip, permission to drift, permission to lower standards, just enough to feel human again. You reject that framing. You are human because you choose discipline, not because you abandon it. You refine your understanding of maintenance. Maintenance is not intensity, it is rhythm. Consistent wake times, clean habits, clear boundaries. Nothing extreme, nothing heroic. Just non-negotiable basics executed daily. This is unglamorous strength. You notice how easily people mistake calm for conclusion. They believe peace means arrival. You know, peace is merely an environment. It can host growth or decay equally, as you stay awake within it. At night, you visualize the version of yourself 5, 10, 20 years from now. Not triumphant, not dominant, intact, capable, clear-eyed, still dangerous, not because of power, but because of reliability. Reliability under time is rare. Most people peak emotionally. Few endure structurally. You also recognize that no one will warn you if you slip. No alarms sound when standards erode. The world does not punish decay immediately. It rewards comfort generously until the bill arrives. You don't wait for the bill. You keep your routines boring and exact. You do not innovate discipline for novelty's sake. You don't chase optimization endlessly. You preserve what works. This restraint is wisdom. At night, sleep comes easily because nothing inside you is unresolved. You did what needed to be done, even when nothing demanded it. You honored structure without drama. That creates quiet confidence. You are not waiting for a challenge to remind you who you are. You already know. And you are not eager to test it again unnecessarily. This is maturity. As sleep settles in, one thought anchors itself calmly, without force. Becoming dangerous changed your life. Remaining dangerous will define it. Hey, and this phase has only begun. As time passes, you realize something most people never articulate. Decay does not announce itself as weakness. It arrives as comfort, as flexibility. Just this once. It sounds reasonable. It feels earned. And that is why it is lethal. At night, lying still, you don't fear losing everything, okay? That fear is too obvious. What you guard against is something quieter, losing sharpness without noticing, slowly enough that nothing feels wrong until it is. You train awareness for this specifically. It's not paranoia, sensitivity. You notice when routines start slipping emotionally before they slip behaviorally, when excuses sound intelligent, when discipline begins to negotiate instead of execute. Negotiation is the warning sign. You shut it down early. You remind yourself that discipline is not a mood. It is an agreement you made with yourself when you were fully aware of the cost of weakness. You honored that agreement, not because you were afraid, but because breaking it would fracture trust. Self-trust is the real asset here. At night, you think less about what you want and more about what you allow. Want is unstable. Allowance defines reality. You design your environment so that decay has fewer entry points, fewer temptations, fewer decisions that rely on willpower. You don't test yourself unnecessarily. You also stop confusing growth with addition. At this stage, subtraction is more powerful. Removing noise, removing excess, removing commitments that dilute focus. Simplicity becomes protection. You recognize that remaining dangerous does not mean remaining intense. Intensity burns fuel. Precision conserves it. You choose precision. Your days are steady. Your effort is clean. Your reactions are minimal. This steadiness is not passive. It is fortified. At night, you review behavior without emotion, not to critique, to confirm. Our standards intact, our boundaries clear, the structure still holding without strain. If yes, you rest. If no, you correct quietly. You don't announce corrections. You don't dramatize them. You adjust and move on. This prevents ego from attaching to maintenance. Ego ruins longevity. You also accept that this phase will never be admired publicly. People celebrate, rise, and collapse. They ignore preservation. You are comfortable being unremarkable in appearance and exceptional in substance. This is a conscious trade. At night, as your breathing slows, there is a subtle satisfaction, not pride, alignment, the sense that you are living in accordance with your values, without resistance. This is what most people mean when they talk about peace, but never reach. Peace earned through structure does not weaken you. Hate stabilizes you. And stability, sustained over time, is more dangerous than any single burst of power. As sleep takes you, the thought settles calmly and clearly. You are not maintaining strength because you fear becoming weak. You are maintaining it because this is who you are now. At the final stage of remaining dangerous, something unexpected happens. Effort disappears. Not because standards dropped, but because discipline has fused with identity. There is no longer a gap between who you are and what you do. This is where most journeys end quietly. At night, lying still, you no longer scan for failure or improvement. You observe continuity. Days connect cleanly. Actions align naturally. There is no internal friction because nothing inside you is being forced. You are not holding the line anymore. You are the line. This does not mean life becomes effortless. It means resistance no longer feels personal. When challenges appear, you address them without narrative. When opportunities arise, you evaluate them without hunger. When nothing happens, you remain intact. This emotional neutrality is the final safeguard. You understand now that the greatest threat to long-term strength is identity inflation. It's a belief that you are finished, that you are immune. That discipline no longer needs attention. You never believe that. Instead, you respect cycles. You know energy fluctuates, focus shifts, seasons change. What remains constant is your response to those changes. You adjust without abandoning structure. This adaptability keeps you alive. At night, your reflection is almost wordless. You don't replay days. You don't plan speeches. You don't fantasize outcomes. You simply check alignment and let go. That letting go is not indifference. It is confidence. It's confidence that you will show up tomorrow the same way you did today. .com. Prepared. Uncompromised. You also accept a final truth. Remaining dangerous does not require isolation, invisibility, or constant vigilance anymore. It requires honesty. It's radical honesty about when you are drifting and humility to correct it immediately. No drama, no self-punishment, just correction. This humility is what keeps legends from becoming stories about who they used to be. At night, as sleep settles in, there is no sense of arrival, no finish line, no conclusion, just continuation. Okay. And that is the highest level of mastery. Okay. Because mastery is not about reaching a state. Okay. It is about staying there without effort, without ego, without needing proof. This is the end of Module 11. You are no longer becoming dangerous. You are no longer maintaining danger. You are simply living as someone who cannot be undone slowly. One module remains, not about strength, not about discipline, but about legacy. What remains when you are no longer in the room. Legacy is not what you leave behind. It is what remains standing after you leave the room. Most people misunderstand this. They think legacy is reputation, memory, recognition. They think it is built at the end of life, summarized in stories told by others. That is comforting and wrong. Legacy is built quietly, daily, long before anyone notices. At night, lying still, you no longer ask what you will achieve. You ask what will endure without you. What habits, standards, and structures will continue to exist even when your presence is removed. This question changes how you move. You stop performing for memory. You stop chasing impact that requires your constant involvement. You begin designing systems that function without your supervision, principles that don't need enforcement, standards that don't collapse when you're absent. This is mature power. Dangerous people at this level are no longer the center of gravity. They are the axis. Things rotate correctly because they exist, not because they intervene constantly. At night, you reflect on influence rather than control. Control requires presence. Influence persists through absence. You ask yourself where your behavior has taught others how to behave, not through instruction, but through consistency. People imitate what is stable. You notice that your calm has shaped rooms without effort, that your restraint has set limits others respect even when you're not there, that your standards have become reference points rather than rules. This is legacy forming in real time. You also understand that legacy demands restraint from ego, the urge to be credited, to be acknowledged, to have your name attached. These urges weaken what you're trying to build. You let them go. At night, you visualize stepping away completely. No explanation, no farewell. And you observe what remains intact, what collapses, what adapts. Mental exercise is uncomfortable and essential. Anything that collapses without you was never legacy. Anything that adapts may become one. So you refine again, you simplify, you clarify. You remove yourself where you are unnecessary. You empower structures instead of personalities. This is why true legacy builders often appear detached. They are not disengaged. They are deliberate. They understand that dependence is fragility disguised as loyalty. You don't want to be needed forever. You want what you built to be needed. At night, this understanding brings a different kind of peace. Not rest from effort, but relief from ego. You are no longer carrying the weight of being essential. You are building something that outlives urgency. You also recognize that legacy is not scale. It's integrity over time. One person changed correctly is worth more than 1,000 impressed briefly. You stop measuring reach. You measure depth. Depth compounds. Sleep takes you. One final realization from this phase anchors itself quietly. You didn't become dangerous to dominate rooms. You became dangerous to leave rooms stronger than you found them, even when no one remembers your name. This is where the final work begins. At this stage, legacy stops being something you think about and becomes something you practice unconsciously. You no longer ask how you will be remembered. You ask how others behave after interacting with you and whether that behavior holds when you are gone. That is the real measure. At night, lying in the dark, you replay interactions, not for dominance or correctness, but for residue. Did the conversation leave clarity or confusion, strength or dependency, order or emotional noise? You begin to see that every interaction leaves a trace. Weak people leave tension behind. Ego-driven people leave chaos. Insecure people leave questions. You aim to leave structure. This changes how you speak, okay? You talk less, but with intention. You don't overload people with insight, okay? You don't flood them with direction. You say what is necessary, then step back and let them stand on their own. This restraint is difficult. It requires letting others struggle slightly, letting them own decisions, letting them fail, without rescuing them to preserve your image as strong or wise. You resist the urge to intervene, because legacy is not built by saving people repeatedly. It is built by making them stronger in your absence. At night, you reflect on where you might still be centralizing power unintentionally, where people rely on your presence instead of internalizing standards. You correct this quietly. You delegate authority, not just tasks. You reinforce principles, not preferences. You step back deliberately. This does not diminish you. It multiplies you. You begin to understand that true danger at this level is invisible, not only in presence, but in absence. Systems continue. Standards remain. People hold lines you once held for them. That is legacy taking root. You also accept that this kind of legacy will never feel dramatic. There are no emotional highs, no moments of recognition. Often, there is silence. Sometimes, even in gratitude. You don't resent this. Gratitude creates attachment. Attachment creates fragility. You prefer durability. At night, sleep comes with a sense of completion, not because the journey is over, but because the work no longer depends on your effort alone. You are no longer carrying everything. You also realize something humbling. Legacy does not belong to you once it exists. Others will adapt it, modify it, sometimes misunderstand it. That is not failure. That is proof it is alive. You let go of ownership. Ownership is control. Legacy is release. As sleep settles in, one truth becomes clear without emotion or resistance. You are no longer building strength for yourself. You are embedding strength into the world, quietly, permanently, without asking to be remembered. This is where the journey ends, not with intensity, not with dominance, but with quiet permanence. At this stage, you are no longer aware of yourself as dangerous. The word no longer matters. What matters is that your presence has weight, and your absence does not create collapse. Things hold. People stand. Standards remain. Ties the final form. At night, lying still, there's nothing left to chase. No version of yourself to become. No proof to collect. No hunger to feed. You are not finished. You are complete enough to continue without force. This is a rare peace. You understand now that legacy is not heroic. It is practical. It lives in how others make decisions when you are not there, and how they respond to pressure because they watched how you responded, and how they hold their own standards because yours never wavered. You didn't teach this with speeches. You taught it with consistency. At night, you no longer review days looking for improvement or threat. You review them for alignment, and alignment is almost automatic now. The system runs, the values hold. Correction, when needed, is simple and unemotional. This is mastery without tension. You also accept something that once would have felt uncomfortable. You will not be fully understood, and that is fine. Understanding is not required for impact. Many of the strongest influences in history were only understood long after they were gone. You don't need interpretation. You need continuity. You stop trying to explain your path. Stop summarizing lessons. You allow people to take what they are ready for and leave the rest. Legacy does not force comprehension. It invites adaptation. At night, you imagine the world continuing without you. Not bleakly, but calmly. You see structures holding, people acting with quiet discipline, standards applied without your voice. this image does not threaten you. It reassures you, because it means you succeeded. You also recognize that nothing about this required perfection, only honesty, correction, refusal to betray yourself slowly. That is all it ever took. You were never meant to be untouchable. You were meant to be unmovable. Okay. At night, as sleep takes you for the last time in this journey, there is no grand conclusion, no closing statement. Okay. Just a settled understanding. You learned how to become dangerous in the dark. You learned how to remain dangerous in silence. Okay. And now you leave behind something stronger than fear, louder than violence, more permanent than recognition. And for anyone who understands what they just listened to, it is only the beginning.